Hello, Meoni here. Welcome back to another discussion video. Today we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about what players on social media want from the 8.0 expansion and what they're looking forward to being announced at the FanFest, be that at Anaheim, California, coming up next month for FanFest LA. And we also have the EU FanFest in Germany and then the Tokyo FanFest following that. What are people excited for? What do you want from the next expansion? And a lot of the answers have been quite interesting. I just asked this on various social media and we've compiled this. It's a very small subset, obviously, of what I can reach, and not everybody uses social media platforms, obviously. So I'm going to ask you in the comment section, what are you looking forward to most in 8.0? What do you hope gets announced? What is your absolute dream feature for the next expansion? I'm interested to see what you come up with. But let's go back to this then. So after asking that question on various platforms, as you might imagine, the responses were a mixture of genuine feedback, wild speculation, copium, and the occasional extremely specific request. So today we're going to look at some of the most common themes that people mentioned on social media and some of the more interesting suggestions as well. One of the biggest things that pretty much everybody mentioned at the tippy top of a pyramid, if we were to say it was a pyramid of desire, at the top of the pyramid of desire would be job changes. Quite a lot of people feel that the combat system has become a little bit too homogenized. That word was used several times. Some players would like jobs to feel more distinct again bringing up the comment of job identity. And a lot of others mentioned that button bloat has gotten pretty extreme in recent expansions. That is something that surprised me after seeing a lot of buttons taken away. A lot of people still think there's quite a lot of button bloat, so take that as you will. There were also quite a few comments about healers in particular. Several players said they want healers to, actually heal again, rather than feeling like that some players jokingly call them green DPS. And of course, Astrologian came up quite a few times as well within that, with some players hoping the job receives another round of adjustments in the future and better job identity with cards and, the look of the stars, that kind of thing. There were also requests for specific job changes. Dragoon redesigns were mentioned that people want. Dark Knight adjustments came up more than once, and some people even suggested that the design direction of Viper and Pictomancer, with their slightly more free-flowing rotations, although that really isn't kind of the case, might be a blueprint for the future of job design, which really surprised me because I felt a lot of people lean towards that's kind of like how they don't want things to be. But that was wrong, apparently. A good portion of people use Viper and Pictomancer as the ideal template for a future blueprint. So that surprised me on social media. Another topic that appeared quite frequently, obviously, was character customization and recustomization. Players said that they'd love to see some of the extra customization options currently seen in the mobile version eventually come into the main game. This is something that we still don't have announced. The mobile version does not have a current global release, and unless they are saving that for FanFest, I have no idea what's happening with that, but it would be really cool to recycle some of the things we have seen that the Chinese players have enjoyed on the mobile game come over to ours, including many of the new hairstyles and quality of life features. Things like additional face options is definitely at the tippy top of this sort of desire list as well. Interchangeable horns for aura, regardless of what face that you choose, that's at the top as well. More freedom with facial features and generally more flexibility in the character creator. Again, a lot of players have been playing for more than 10 years at this point, so it would be nice to have more than 4 face options for the character you're investing so much time into, to give yourself a little bit more identity to separate yourself from every other Mikote, for example. And of course, the community would very much also like more glamour plates. I think that goes without saying, but yeah, one person suggested that the obvious solution would be 1 glamour plate for every job in the game, which honestly sounds quite reasonable at this point, considering what we currently have. And speaking of glamour, some people have requested that the glamour dresser itself should have at least 1,600 glamour dresser slots, which may or may not still somehow fill up within about 2 weeks. But I get the desire. I'm personally stuck at the maximum as well and have to keep throwing things into red retainers or throwing them away and hoping I can buy them back from vendors. There's definitely something that can be taken from other MMOs in that regard, especially if we look at World of Warcraft and the way that the glamour system works there, where effectively you loot a piece of gear and you have learnt the image of it. You can throw away that piece of gear then, and you just have a drop down effectively of all of the gear you've collected. That might be a better solution. Is it feasible within this game's engine? That is the bigger question, but a lot of people would wish that they would just steal that idea, as ideas have been shared previously in the many years that we have played MMOs. Housing was another big topic. Players asked for things like larger housing limits, which should be coming, as far as I know, in the 7.5 series. They want instance housing, and even things like Solution 9 housing as a possible future addition. This, again, is, something that comes up at the end of the expansion. People see something they want, and then they're like, please give us this. It's only recently we got Ishgardian housing. That took us a long time. People have been asking for Garlean and Luna housing for the longest time as well. I'm sure this is all being taken on board and you'll eventually get what you want. But as for the turnaround for that, who knows? But a lot of people would like to live in the Solution 9 apartments. I get that. They look pretty cool, honestly. Some players simply want more decorating freedom, while others want just more housing availability to improve overall. And that's obviously something that a lot of people would like. They would like the ability to have a large plot instead of having, the lottery system. There's a few solutions to this. You could definitely look at World of Warcraft once again for inspiration of housing. It may not be the most perfect system, but everybody is guaranteed a house. You don't need to have a subscription, as far as I know, to have a house. And effectively, you have the freedom to place items wherever you want. There's advanced features. I really think the housing system is probably something they need to look at in this game to future-proof it, especially for the next 10 years, you know what I mean, or beyond. I think it's a little bit dated, personally. There was also quite a few comments about the game's world itself, and that's a fair point. Many players would love to see future expansions take us to places we haven't explored yet, but also to places we've been before. A lot of the places feel quite empty, some people mention. You never really go back to places aside from hunt marks and fates. It'd be nice for there to be some storyline that takes us through older zones and adds to those older zones. I totally get that. Additionally, Mericidia was mentioned a lot, along with Ilzabard and even the far north, potentially connected to the Rogadin homelands. Lots of people want to explore more of a world, and that makes sense. A few people suggested that with everything the story has introduced recently, i.e. reflections, space travel, and ancient civilizations, the setting could potentially go in some very unexpected directions in the future, and I think people are just more hyped to see whatever gets announced, honestly, because everybody wants to go every direction, and that's kind of fair. Mericidia has been mentioned a fair amount, though, and I think we're probably not going to see that for a couple of expansions, as far as I'm aware from interview responses at the very least. That's the only metric we have. Another common request was more open world content. Again, several players said they would like zones to feel more rewarding to explore, with more things to discover beyond just fates and quests and bicolor gemstones. Some players mentioned that compared to other MMOs, the open world can sometimes feel a little underutilized. I think that's a fair point. So it'll be interesting to see whether future expansions introduce new systems that give players more reasons to spend time exploring those areas. Recently, obviously, there's been a lot of hype around Beastmaster, which is something that is supposedly going to be announced later this week during a live letter previewing 7.5 content. Beastmaster is supposed to be an end of expansion activity. Hopefully that Beastmaster activity gets more players to go in the open world areas. But I see what people are saying, just more in general, and I think people want to rediscover places that we've already been to and have more things to do, right, in the open world. Make the most of these beautiful open world areas, and I can totally agree with that. There were also some requests for quality of life improvements, as you would imagine. Things like improvements to the friends list, which obviously is quite a laggy piece of crap and barely works. Honestly, it's even if your friend list isn't full, the thing barely loads. Better gearing options for alt jobs was mentioned. Improving item level syncing in roulettes, and even the possibility of cross data center party finder, which would certainly be a very welcome addition for many players, and I would totally agree. This is something that's high on my list of requests as well. If it was me to ask this, it would probably be at the top of the list. I play on Chaos Data Center, which, if you don't know, has significantly less players these days than the Light Data Center, which is the 2 European data centers. And when they split us apart, effectively everybody congregated to Light and effectively made that the place to do anything, basically, in Party Finder, which is really depressing. So to have a cross data center Party Finder would fix a few of the issues and allow people to play wherever they wanted to. It's about time we got cross data center Party Finder. The cloud data center information, we haven't got any feedback on how well that worked when they tested the cloud data centers. It'd be nice to have either that as a solution or cross data center Party Finder just in general would fix a lot of issues, I think. The cloud servers is something that I want answers to, because when I tested those, they felt quite good from my perspective. So I'd like to see what the general consensus has been from that testing. It's something they've been keeping quiet on, and I'm hoping that, FanFest is where they start talking about those features. But hopefully. Not every single suggestion was entirely serious. Lots of people were asking for, various different things like romancing certain NPCs. I guess they were serious at the same time. A romance minigame has been at the top of a lot of our peers' list. I don't know really beyond that. That's not something I know much about, but I think a lot of people want a dating minigame where you can date certain characters. I don't know the ramifications of something like that. Who knows with this community at the end of the day? Someone simply asked, can I have a return of the Namazu in the storyline? I mean, this is the sort of general idea of some of the feedback. People just want stuff. And of course, there was a very direct request simply for a butt slider. We get this every time there is an expansion and anybody asks these questions. You did not disappoint. Someone specifically wants a butt slider. Is something like that possible in 2026? You let me know. I don't know on it, honestly, anymore, what would be applicable. But yeah, there we go. Lots of people want just more activities in the game to do, whether that's new core systems, new long-term progression content similar to Bozja or Eureka, or simply more things to do in between patches. A lot of people have mentioned that the gear progression system definitely needs an overhaul. It's a very old system. There needs to be more ways of gearing your character, lots of sub-content. I think people just want more stuff to do and more ways to impact their character in more ways. Like a perfect example of this was Criterion. Recently, a lot of people's feedback for the Criterion mode of A Merchant's Tale was, wow, materia. Yeah, there are a couple of cool rewards on there. There's the Genie mount that is market tradable. There's the Framers kit, which is, it's your own desire if you like it or not. And then a title, the Literary Canon. The content itself was not enough of an incentive to go and do the content, if that makes sense. People expected there to be something more with the redesign of how that content was supposed to be redesigned. A lot of people expected there to be a different progression system, whether that is folly or not, It does bring up a big point that a lot of people just want the system to be shaken up and a new direction to be taken. So we'll have to wait and see. A few people mentioned that they hope the development team is quietly working on larger back-end improvements, which might not always be visible immediately, but could improve the game significantly. A lot of people want the valid excuses regardless of the engine being less of an excuse. We've had a lot of changes graphically, the graphical improvements. I think it's time to tackle some of the deeper, tangled issues that affect the implementation of features that we've mentioned so far that people desire, right? Maybe that's where they should focus on, not necessarily a brand new engine, but maybe a look at what can be done, maybe some of the budget or most of the budget put into the back end to make the next 10 years live up alongside other MMORPGs that may or may not come out, right? It's a bit of an interesting time for MMOs at the moment. You've seen a lot of them come out and then disappear very quickly or get cancelled or whatever it might be. Very, very volatile sort of environment, but whatever they intend to do, I hope it's something experimental and interesting, right? Because that's the way I've always seen Square Enix, is the ability to throw things at a wall and see what sticks and then, build on that. It takes a little bit longer in recent years, but I hope that they Personally, I hope they go back to the idea of being creative and productive and try to think of new ways to approach things and look at the open market of other games, not necessarily just MMOs, but how other games are dealing with certain hurdles and maybe just stealing those ideas. Being influenced is never a bad thing. Being enclosed and narrow-minded is a terrible thing when it comes to development of games because you're always going to be in the past, right? So the game does need to advance. It needs to go in a different direction. We'll see what happens. Obviously, there's a lot of storyline speculation. A lot of people want certain characters. Some people would like to see the focus shift towards new characters, completely outside of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, after being probably disgruntled slightly with the Scions of the Seventh Dawn's involvement in Dawntrail, while others hope we continue to see familiar faces in future storylines. So it's a bit of a flip of a coin, really. And yes, at least one person asked for Emmett Selk to come back. I don't know at this point, but that would be awesome as well. I would agree. Yeah, that would be quite an interesting set of creative storytelling. Maybe another little, like, you know, foreshadowing, a little like a flashback or something. It'd be really interesting, but I don't think I don't know what else they could do, really. Overall, the community seems to be hoping for a mixture of things in 8.0, and so what can we take from this? The top of the list, then, job improvements, identity, making the characters that you play feel like they are the specific job they are playing. Give job identity a real boost. Make it really epic to play each one of them. Not necessarily button bloat those to the moon, but make it feel impactful, exciting. You know, things that people want are interesting job design. If you're going to be focusing on the majority of the mechanics within fights being more and more progressive, the characters themselves need to feel like they're doing some impact with their damage, you know, that you have some choices as well, not necessarily just a cookie cutter way of looking at things. So a lot of job improvements. Job identity is at the top of the list. Character customization seems to be just below that on the pyramid, with a lot of people wanting their character to feel more interesting, to have more options. That goes without saying. I mean, it's normal for an MMORPG that you get attached to your character and you want better things for it. Better housing systems across the board, more accessible housing, better housing placement, better instancing, new areas to explore, possibly larger gameplay or system changes as the game continues to evolve. Because as we know, if it fails to evolve, then the next 10 years of the game will be more of the same, and I don't think you're going to bring in as many people as you think you would bring in normally to each expansion if you don't make changes. Even if that, you know, shakes the pot up a little bit and makes some people more disgruntled than they currently are, sometimes that's the best way to do it, rather than being exactly the same. And I think that's something we can probably look forward to. I have high hopes for FanFest, which might be copium in its entirety, but I have faith that there is, the next 10 years will get better, and that we will have completely different, radically designed game compared to now. Like, if you were to compare now to 10 years from now, I would like both games to look completely different and have a lot of differences made on player, based on not only just player feedback, but also what game that Square Enix wants to create, rather than looking specifically only at, you know, YouTube videos or Reddit or their forums. I want them to be kind of a little bit selfish as well. I want them to sit there and go, what game do we want to make? What game do we want players to be enjoying in 10 years? What do we want to go and play ourselves? And at that point, then it will have an identity that is unique, right? But also at the same time, look outside of the doors at what other people are doing and, you know, bring that influence in, but still make it your own, right? Not try to change things for any specific agenda or specific direction of other games or whatever. Still keep that classic Final Fantasy XIV formula, but advance on it, right? Shake things up a little bit. But anyway, I've ranted on enough, and it's been interesting, and thank you for anybody who did reply to me on the various social media platforms we looked at. This includes Facebook, X, a few other places, basically everywhere. And yeah, thank you for that. But in the comments section, what would you personally like to see in 8.0? What are you excited to be announced at FanFest? if at all anything. Let me know your grim, predictions, or what you think will actually happen and what you would actually want to happen. And there are really no wrong answers, really, at the end of the day. And what do you think about other people's opinions? Try to be as positive, but also, neutral at the same time, right? Try not to poop on other people just because of their opinion. That's what this is about, trying to see what people want. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that was interesting. It was certainly interesting for me. There was a few things that I didn't think about and certainly didn't have expectations that people would say. And more videos on the way. We'll find out if we're all right soon, next month at FanFest. And yeah, if you're going to that, have a great time. I'll be watching on the internet and making videos as usual. So we'll see what happens for the future of Final Fantasy. Much love. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.